All right, I went ahead and hit record, so we're recording. Yeah, and there's that chat button, y'all, if you want to log in, if you want to post a question.
Well, go ahead and get started then. It's good to see y'all. I probably apologize for the confusion this week for those of you all that are on here live and those that are going to watch this later. We've kind of been out in the field for a few days here in Lithuania. Lithuania now, not Norway anymore. So it's been pretty chilly here. Hey, Sudan, good to see you. So tonight we had a pretty long day today. The field Marines were working hard out there working on some attacks and things like that. So everybody's cold and wet, and the battalion commander decided to let us come back to the tents. So I'm pretty excited about that, and that also means that I get to join you all for this week 3, I guess it is. But this week we're going to talk about 7 ways to destroy your marriage, or if you want to look at it more positively, I guess, 7 things not to do in your marriage. And this doesn't just necessarily apply, when your spouse comes home, but really any time. And so I sent the list to Claire earlier, so I don't have them written down. So Claire's going to read the list off one by one, and we'll kind of chat about each one real quick.
Yes.
And then if y'all have questions, we can take those, but otherwise we will post this to Facebook later today. Appreciate y'all's time.
Excellent. Yeah, and I went ahead and muted everybody as you came on so that if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, but that way we don't hear the background noise so much on the recording. But don't take that like you can't be on here because we're glad to have you. All right, so number 1, David says, ways to destroy your marriage. Seek comfort from someone besides your spouse, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, besides counseling.
Yeah, so this is something I see quite a bit on both sides of the coin, and I share this with your guys just about any time I talk about marriage is one of the things I talk about. So one of the most common themes that we counsel people on is what I would call kind of emotional infidelity, where maybe you guys are having a hard time with things, and either you or he reaches out to an old friend or boyfriend or old girlfriend or something along those lines, particularly with the advances of technology and community groups and things like that. So if you're talking about your spouse to anybody else and they don't know about it, that's not good, and it's a sure way to destroy your marriage. So one of the things Claire and I agreed upon pretty early on, her kind of go-to friend is her mom, which is doubly awkward sometimes when we're talking about certain subjects. So we kind of agreed that if we were going to talk about our marriage or personal things in our lives, that we would talk about it with each other first and make sure that the other person knows what we're talking about, whether it's your mom or whether it's talking to a friend, a girlfriend, going out for drinks, or whether it's whatever it is. Make sure you guys are on the same page and you're both comfortable with sharing that information. Outside of that, friendships. This is kind of a personal choice thing, but it's something that Claire and I have it's very difficult to not put up boundaries for yourselves with regards to Facebook or Instagram or whatever other method you have of talking to people. If the grass looks greener on the other side, it's usually because there's a septic tank underneath. So just be very cautious with that. And in our relationship, at least, we don't do it. We don't put ourselves into that situation. We don't have friends on Facebook that the other person doesn't at least know. That's just kind of one of our things. So I try not to be, one of our kind of boundaries is I'm never alone with a woman, unless it's counseling, obviously. But and that just protects us from neither one of us have plans to, I hope, at least, to be unfaithful, but that kind of protects us from that. If we have those boundaries in place and we hold to those, we could never be even accused of something negative happening. So.
Yeah, we even ran into that recently. I had a friend whose husband was going to help me pick something up from here in the neighborhood, and she was even like, well, why don't you just ride with him? I was like, no, we've got these boundaries put up that, I'll take my car and he'll drive in his own. And it may seem extreme, But not only is it a safeguard for me and for my marriage, but it's also for the people around us that know that I'm not riding around the neighborhood, because you know how it is in a military town. Oh, her husband's deployed and I saw her riding with the neighbor and his wife is out of town, so it's so easy for that to happen. And I know that as women, we throw up conversations with people and we chat with people, and a lot of that can even be misconstrued by your spouse. Last deployment, the neighbor kids played a lot in the road together, and there was a husband that was outside almost all the time, and our kids played together. And David is not jealous by nature, but I also would say things like, oh yeah, Travis and I were talking, and it's just, I wanted David to know that we're always outside in front of the neighborhood. Like, we were never alone in our house together, just making sure that David was always aware that that I was honoring that commitment to him, and to make sure that I was safeguarding our marriage at all times.
And so that's one of those things. I think that it's I'm very secure in our marriage, but when we're deployed as often as we are, and we see some of the stuff that goes on, it's very hard for us not to, when we have those kind of insecure moments, not to question even things like that. And so I would hope that would encourage you as wives, at least, that if your husband is questioning some of those things, it's not abnormal. I think I'm fairly secure in our marriage, but even I have times where I'm like, what do you mean you're talking to this Travis guy who isn't Travis? And I know Travis pretty well. So putting those boundaries in place, like for instance, knowing that she didn't ride with this guy, or knowing that she's always outside with him, even those little things can bring comfort especially when we're a long way away.
So number one is we're not going to seek comfort from someone beside our spouses.
Yeah, we could probably spend a whole session just on talking about those, but that's the main gist of that. If you got more questions about that or any of these in particular, feel free to send those, and we can give you more detailed answers. But we'll move on to save time. Number 2.
All right. So the second way to destroy your marriage is to put your expectations for a perfect spouse on him or her. There is no such thing as a perfect spouse. So let them be them. Let them be who they are.
Yeah. So this one's tricky. So because we all kind of put our best feet forward, whatever, when we're dating. Can you hear me better now? Is this a little better? I saw somebody put it on there. Okay. We always try to put our best feet forward when we're dating. And then once we start living together and understanding each other better, and we're going to talk about this part a little bit more later, but seeing each other's faults, it's very easy to think this is not the person that I dreamed of marrying. And I would just challenge you, whether you're the husband or the spouse, hopefully the husbands will watch these at some point, that you don't put those unrealistic expectations. That part of becoming a couple and becoming one together is developing in that relationship with each other and maturing together and growing together, if that makes sense. So it's very easy to say, well, I had hoped you would be this, and this. Well, that's not who they are, and that may not be who they are. And so making sure that you're not putting that on the other person. That's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you.
Yeah. I can think of many times in our marriage where I would be like, well, if he had just read my mind, like I get so mad because he didn't read my mind. Well, if I don't communicate with him my expectations, and I have all this idea that, oh, he should just have so much grace with me, and that if I make a mistake, it should be fine. But what about me and the way I treat him? Do I have grace for him and his mistakes or in his lackings and his, and it's not that he lacks, it's just that we're all humans, we're all people, and we can't always be, at our best. We're not always going to be at our best with the people around us, especially those that we are married to and that we live with day in and day out. So it's bringing back some of our expectations and becoming more realistic about it, and realizing also that he is never going to perform 100% the way I want him to. He's never going to live all of those expectations out if I am unrealistic, if I have this knight in shining armor, and we do this when they're deployed. I hear all the time, if my husband were only home. If your husband were only home, you'd still have to do the laundry, you'd still have to do the dishes, you'd still have to take the car for service. There's a lot that they do to help at the end of the day. But when they come home, we need to have realistic expectations. It's not It's not a Disney honeymoon when they come home. So one way to shatter your homecoming is to have these unrealistic expectations on them when they
or at least communicate what they are, and then talk about if that's realistic or not. That's not saying you shouldn't have high standards or high hopes or high expectations for your spouse. It's more of a well, that's not the way my mom cooks, or that's not. I would never say that, but you know what I'm saying. Like sometimes that's the stuff that will destroy a marriage. So. All right, number 3. We got to move on. We're taking.
Okay, always
5.
Sorry, I know. Always think about, focus on, and look for positive things about your spouse. Negatives are easy. So.
So this falls into that expectations thing again. So, kind of, but it's a little bit different. So if you have those expectations and your spouse isn't meeting those, it's very easy to identify those things and not necessarily identify the places that they are meeting your hopes or your dreams or your expectations. And so one tool that I can't remember who shared this with us, but one of our pastors, I think, somewhere we came across it, but was for every negative thing, you should say at least 10 positive things. Or even if you don't say them, although I encourage you to say them, at least look for all the positive things. It's very, very easy. Your spouse probably knows you better than anybody else, and you probably know your spouse better than anybody else. And particularly when they come home, you're going to notice all those glaring faults. So when I would we talked a little bit last week, but when I would put my stinky PT clothes on the bathtub instead of hanging on the hook that she had put up there for me, it's very easy to notice that and forget that I took out the trash or that I did the dishes or whatever. And guys tend to want a lot of credit for a little bit of work. So like Claire can change 10 diapers, have something cooking in the crock pot, have gone shopping and taken all 5 kids with her. And I'd come home from work and, bring the trash can in and want her to think that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So a lot of times when we receive credit for those things, it tends to make us want to do them more. And vice versa, guys, for you when you're thinking about your spouses, look for all the positive things. It's very easy to come home and notice that one thing. If your wife's working or going to school and you come home and, things aren't the way that you wanted them to be, or she's not as affectionate as you want her to be, or whatever it is, it's easy to notice that and miss the 100 other things that she's already done that day. So.
That's good. And once you start mentally, I think as wives, I don't think guys do it as much, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, we mull stuff over in our brains all day long, and we think about the what ifs, and he did that, and I said this, and so, when we speak even negatives about our husband in our own minds, instead of thinking about, okay, focus on, make an effort to say, what did he do that was good? What can I mentally meditate on, as opposed to being negative, instead of feeding yourself that negativity? And I think that starts in our own minds.
And if you're going to share that negative with him, if you have a positive to start with, it makes him a lot more open.
Yeah.
And vice versa for guys, for the girls as well.
Yep. Oh, the next one is big. Number 4. This is the 4th way to ruin or destroy your marriage, is use the word divorce as often as possible, even if you don't really mean it. And threatening divorce. I have heard so many people just threaten the word divorce over silly things. So the way we see it is that it's a bad word. The word divorce should be a bad word, and you should never threaten it or use it.
Yeah, so if you're out here and you're watching this and you're one of the people that have talked to us about using this word as a threat, I promise we're not talking about you, because we've
No.
talked about it 1,000 times. So, but we also heard this from our pastors before we ever got married, as this was one of the main things that could drive a major wedge into a marriage, was when you start using that word, because that's kind of the go-to, right? We know what hurts the people that we love. We know how to hurt them. Sometimes when they hurt us by doing something or not doing something, that's our automatic go-to. And if we threaten to leave, then maybe I'll get my way. But I promise you, it will drive a wedge, and eventually that wedge will break your marriage. And so we had a rule for day one that we wouldn't even use the word. And what that does is when you take that word out of your vocabulary, it takes it from what did we do? Did we make a mistake? Should we keep going with this? To how do we fix it? If there is no out, you're going to look for how to fix it, if that makes sense. If you're always looking for an out or a reason to leave, and again, this ties into looking for all the negatives instead of the positive. But if you use that word and then you start thinking about, well, maybe that is the best option, it's not going to end well. So the reality is marriage takes some work, but it's worth it. It can be fun and it can be an enjoyable thing. And so using that word can really break that down.
Yeah, it creates a shaken, I just see it as the crumbling. Whenever you threaten that, use that word, it just crumbles the structure that you've built your relationship on. So that's a word that we've chosen not to use. All right, so we have less than 10 minutes left. Number 5 is never get help from a professional. Surely your sister that's been divorced 3 times is a better source of counsel. And the rest, it says, get help from the chaplain or other source before you're in the hurricane and your bags are packed.
Yeah, so I've seen this probably more here than when I was a pastor. But so many people wait to come to the chaplain or to anybody else for that matter until, well, she was getting ready to leave and I promised her we'd go to counseling, and so fix us. Or vice versa. Or he's already packed his bags and living with a friend. And it's very, very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult when somebody's already sort of checked out to try to convince them not to go. So again, you'll see kind of a pattern in these 1 through 5 at least. And there's a reason I put them in that order. But when you're looking for the positives, or if you're looking for negatives, then you're going to want to drive towards divorce. And when you drive towards divorce, you start looking for counsel outside. And I used the sister, but really, like my mom has been married 5 times, and so I'm not, and she's been married to the guy she's with now for a long time. But I'm not going to my mom for marriage advice. I'm just not. Okay. There are people that study this stuff that are professionals that know a lot more than I do, or Claire does, even more than us. And so we have already talked about, as a matter of fact, when I get back, I've been gone a lot the last couple of years, the last 4 or 5 years. So we're going to talk to.
I hear you very well.
I said the last 4 or 5 years I've been gone quite a bit. So Claire and I have already started talking about who we're going to go. We're going to go talk to somebody. And it's not because our marriage is on the rocks. It's not because things are bad. It's just we're going through a move. We're going to be PCS, and we're going to be coming back from a deployment, and all these things are stressors. And if we can talk to somebody, a mediator, somebody that is kind of outside the situation, it can help before we get to the point where our marriage is on the rocks. If your marriage is on the rocks, it can be helped, but it's a lot more difficult. So if I'm shaking, I apologize. It's kind of cold. So.
It's a little chilly there, y'all. So get help from a professional. Go seek someone out that has a sturdy marriage and has experience.
Yeah, so I'll say it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional. I wrote that on there, but then as I was thinking about that and kind of praying about that, I don't know that. Like, we got more guidance probably from our pastors, who were not pastoral counselors, who were not, just from sitting in their home and watching them interact with each other. Yeah. Watching them watch TV and watching them interact with their kids and watch them have dinner and watch them live their lives. So if you have a couple that's why Claire and I, when we counsel people, a lot of times we just have them over to the house and we just sit on the couch and drink coffee and talk about stuff. It doesn't have to be go and sit in a psychologist's office. Sometimes that's necessary, but find a couple. Maybe it's your mom and dad or your grandparents or an aunt and uncle or some friends that know some of the stuff you're going through, that you're willing to open up and be really, really honest with, and go from there. Is this number 5?
Yeah, there's 1 left. Well, there's 2, but maybe we stop at 5 today.
Yeah, let's stop at 5 today. The last 2 kind of tied into the other ones anyway, I think. So, we can address those another time. Those will be addressed in later things anyway. But so that's probably one of the biggest things I can say. If you even feel like we talk to somebody at least once a year. We have some pastor friends of ours that are my endorsing agent, and we talk to them at least once a year about what's going on. Find somebody that you can talk to or look up to, or just find somebody who's not going to tell you that you have to do what's best for you.
Yes.
I know that's a hard truth, and that's what the world tries to tell you nowadays. But if you're going to always do what's best for you, your marriage is going to fail. And I hate to put it that bluntly, but I've been doing this a while. And if you're always looking out for you and not for your spouse, your marriage is going to fail.
If you're not looking out for the marriage, if you're not looking out for that sacred bond that you have, and putting yourself first, or only doing what feels good to you in the moment, there's a bigger picture. So you need to find people that will speak truth into your life about your situation, somebody that you can be real with. We needed people that would say things to me that I didn't want to hear, or that he didn't want to hear. We need people in our life like that. And if you ever go to counseling with me or David, you will hear us say things that you probably didn't want to hear, and we'll encourage you at the same time. But we're not here to make best friends with everybody. We're here to help change marriages for the better.
And I'll finish up with this, but when we talk about these things, these are kind of normal marriage stuff. If there's abuse going on, you or your kids are in danger, like, it can be fixed and it is repairable, but don't ever leave yourself in danger.
No.
So I want to make that caveat to all of these things that we're talking about.
Yes.
We've seen marriages come back from abuse. We've seen marriages come back from alcohol addiction. We've seen marriages come back from infidelity, multiple infidelities, and be very strong marriages today. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily stayed in that situation in that moment where they were in danger.
Right.
So all that to be said, your guys are doing awesome out here, at least in Lithuania and in Norway, where I've seen them in the last month. Very, very proud again and honored to be working with them. They motivate me every single day. So it's a great privilege to be serving with your spouses. And I know we're all getting pretty close to the point that we're starting to count days. We're not quite there, but we're getting pretty close. So I know you are too. And we appreciate all your support and your love and your prayers, and keep them coming. And hope to see you all next week. I should be back in Romania, I hope by next week. So we shall see. But any questions or anything while we're on here? Going once, going twice. All right, y'all. This should be posted hopefully maybe later today.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll get it posted.
Okay. And
thanks, guys.
Yep, send us any questions if you have any that you didn't want to ask on here, or if you're watching this later and not live, feel free to send those questions to us, and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can. We're going back out to the field tomorrow, so maybe a few days, but Claire can handle things too. So.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys. We'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.